Touch a button, things happen. A scientist becomes a beast.
Hello and welcome to another bad movie review. This time we are looking at The Beast of Yucca Flats. This is a 1961 film, unrated, runs about 54 minutes, directed by Coleman Francis, written by Coleman Francis, and narrated by Coleman Francis. So this does border on a vanity project. We start off with an opening sequence in a motel room or bedroom or something, where this woman's getting cleaned up or getting out of the shower, and then she is brutally strangled. We'll get back to that scene in a minute. We jump over to a man arriving from an airplane, and this is Joseph Javorsky. He is a defecting Russian scientist of some kind. He has secrets about the Russian moonshot that he wants to turn over to the US government, I guess in exchange for taking political asylum. It's a little vague and unclear, but he has photos and secrets about their moon trip. And for some reason, he is going to a nuclear testing site to meet with, like, his handlers, I guess. Why they're taking him to a secret location, I don't know. But it's the testing grounds of Yucca Flats. Unfortunately for him, two agents from the Soviet Union are there to put a stop to this kind of betrayal and get that briefcase back that has all these photos and plans and blah, blah, blah. So there's this chase sequence and a shootout, and Javorsky ends up running out into the desert, and that's just when they drop an A-bomb. So there's a scientist running out into a nuclear explosion. Why does this sound familiar? Oh yeah, because the next year a comic book would debut called The Incredible Hulk, where a scientist ran out into a nuclear test field and became a monster. Wow, that doesn't sound familiar at all. It's almost like maybe they got some inspiration from this movie, and that would make me incredibly sad if that were true. But we'll never know because Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are both dead. Well, now he's transformed into a beast, which looks a lot like he did before, but with some like slight crackling makeup on, so he looks a little like he has dry skin problems. And then he goes on a murder rampage of some sort that's really mild. And he kills this couple, takes the woman's body back to this cave, and then two cops are on the case. We got Jim Archer and Joe Dobson. They end up finding the woman's body and taking it back to civilization. Meanwhile, a couple and their kids are out driving or something, and the kids wander off. They seem to have a habit of this. The two kids end up getting lost at some point, and the dad goes looking for them, but Jim Archer, one of the cops, is in a plane and just starts shooting at that dude for no reason. He's running. He must be guilty of something. So he shoots at him from an airplane and then jumps out of the airplane. It's really weird. Now, when the dad, Hank, gets back to his wife, he just takes the car and takes off looking for people to help find his kids. Never really says anything about getting shot at to his wife, who he pretty much ditched in the desert for a while. And then all of these things kind of converge as the beast starts chasing the kids around when they go poking around, because he gets very angry about that. I don't know how a lot of this stuff really ties together, because the storyline with the cops, they're just kind of out wandering around. They do some rock climbing, and then they get in an airplane for some reason because they're going to parachute somewhere. It's a little vague, and all through the movie we get this narration of this kind of pseudo-philosophy stuff that ends up being distracting and boring as they try and make this movie into some kind of grand allegory for the Cold War or something. I don't know. They keep talking about progress, and I kept kind of zoning out because all of the dialogue in this movie is dubbed in because they recorded it with no sound. Now, the budget was only $35,000, but I don't know where that money went, because a lot of this probably could have been done in a weekend for significantly less money, but I guess you actually have to pay people to be in movies like this. And it's a real waste of Tor Johnson. I think that he could have been a much bigger movie star than he was, but he never really seemed to get a chance to actually do real acting. He always ended up in these like low budget goofball films, and that's fine, but still never really gave him a chance to do anything. So he just sort of wanders around in most of his movies, not actually having much dialogue. And this movie's no exception. Now, there's barely any dialogue in here, even dubbed. It's mostly the narrator. I counted 5 deaths, but there's probably 6. The ending is a bit unclear as to what actually happens to the beast. It does appear that he's dead, but that's really not that definitive, because the final scene does kind of indicate he may still be alive. Also, let's go back to that very opening scene. There are 2 versions of this movie at least, because that opening scene in the non-US version has an extra 19 seconds that are almost all nudity. The American version, you get to see partial nudity, including part of an areola. So I'm counting that as 1 plot point, because you do get to see enough of the boob that it does probably count, but the foreign version is a little more titillating apparently, where she's topless for a significantly longer time, 19 whole seconds, and that is largely edited out of most US releases. And also the film quality is noticeably different. There are a lot of problems with this film. It has a lot of weird problems in it, mostly the dialogue, because when they film it without sound, they don't always dub in the voices to kind of match the background, so sometimes it sounds like they're in a tin can, and most of the time it just doesn't sound like they're even close to being outside. And apparently that last scene that I was referencing was sort of improvised, because this bunny rabbit just wandered into the shot and they really just ran with it and let that stay in the movie. It looked like there wasn't anything done in more than 1 take on this film. Now, this was Tor Johnson's final official role. He was in an uncredited scene in a movie called Head in 1968, but this was technically his final starring role. Unfortunately, he passed away in 1971. There's a brief cameo by Conrad Brooks and Anthony Cardoza, all of whom were, of course, Roger Corman regulars, and they are completely wasted in this film. Obviously, they were doing it for a paycheck, but it really just didn't do them any favors being in this one. Now, unfortunately, for most people, this movie is going to be a gigantic failure. I, however, disagree. I think it had some pretty redeeming qualities if you're not watching it alone, because this movie is pretty fun. It's just not fun to watch alone. It's a good one for a group viewing where you can kind of make fun of the silliness of it and the over-the-top nature, but it's got so many flaws that watching it alone makes it kind of boring, and you really can't vent your frustrations with the film when you're sitting by yourself. Not properly, anyway. So I think this is a good cheese film, but definitely a group viewing. It's so over the top, especially the scene where the beast is chasing the kids, and it is the most meandering old people at the mall wandering kind of chase sequence I've ever seen. They're just sort of not in a hurry. It's like a brisk walk chase scene. There's really not a lot of violence in here. There's a couple of scenes near the end that are slightly action-packed, but it's so goofy, and the fact they had to dub in the gunshot sounds, which are very generic, almost cartoonish sounding, really adds to the cheese factor of this movie. So it's very heavy on the cheese and silliness, and honestly, this movie probably deserves a remake. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it has fallen into public domain, so it probably could do with a good remake and actually turn it into a pretty fun film, but I don't think anybody's willing to take the time to put the money and effort into doing that, unfortunately, because the core idea of the film isn't bad. It's just really horribly executed to such a degree that it's comical. So while the rating on this is always pretty low, I think that is, of course, where a good B-movie fan is going to see solid gold cheese, because this one is a classic, and it's a cult classic for sure, for all the wrong reasons. It is definitely a very hardcore B-movie that the cheese level is not going to appeal to everyone. And if you watch it by yourself, you're not going to have nearly as much fun as you will bantering with somebody else mocking this piece of cinema delight, because this one has so much to make fun of. So it's a giant waste of all the talent involved, and the camera work is pretty rough. The narration is really really over-the-top pseudo-philosophy garbage, and the dialogue is borderline non-existent and simplistic. So there's not a lot here that would make this salvageable to a normie. So only for the hardcore fans of B-movies am I going to recommend this. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.